Hey, hey, hey! How you guys doing? I'm back. Despite the warnings, I am back. How are you? Welcome to the warm-up. As you can see, I'm in a new location. I'm no longer in my bunker studio. I have now set up my studio in a place that has windows. It's magnificent. What this means... Oh, by the way, good afternoon. It's morning somewhere, just not here. But let's get back to it. So I got Tini Howard on, right? I got Tini Howard on in a few minutes, but I want to tell you about the new location. I got windows. So what that means is there's going to be construction noises outside, maybe. There's going to be dogs barking. There's going to be kids hopefully playing apart from each other. But anything could go wrong again. It's a brand new setup. I'm trying to figure it all out, and I think this is more comfortable than I was before, and certainly a little less depressing. Also, my internet went completely out yesterday. It could happen again today. I hope it won't. So we got Tini Howard on, but before Tini, I want to put this out there again. I'm trying to get Christopher Priest on the show. I am petitioning to get Christopher Priest on the show. He says he wants to do the show, but he's just afraid of the internet and social and all that sort of stuff. He's also in the middle of stuff, which he's always in the middle of stuff. So I need you guys to please tweet me on my social. Anyone on my social, did I get it right? I got it right. Okay. Anyone on my social handles, tweet me and tell me that you want Christopher Priest on the show. Really, as badly as I do. I know you do. He'd be a great guest. He's an awesome guy to talk to. He's just a genius writer, one of the best people in the world. I need him on the show. If I could have him on every day as my co-host, I would. Wishful thinking. Anyway, if you guys have any suggestions, by the way, for guests, please, once again, on my social, send me suggestions. I'm open and listening. Once again, don't forget, we got the Marvel.com Love comic shops. If you go there, you'll find out what comic shops are open in your area. We're constantly updating it. And when I say open, I mean open in however they're open for business in their area, whether it's, pickup, delivery, whatever it may be, you could find out there. So also, don't forget, we have a Q&A at the end of our interview with Tini, and when that Q&A happens, if you have any questions, I can't see the feed, but the guys at Marvel can see the feed. So if there are any good questions, they're going to pull them out, send them to me. If there aren't, well, you're out of luck. So without further ado, you guys want Tini on? Let's bring Tini on. Tini, unmute yourself. Let's get this thing started. How are you?
Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Tini. How are you? Great to see you.
Good, wonderful. Well, great to see you. Thank you for having me. It's morning here, so I have my Joe.
Yeah, you're on the West Coast. You're Joe squared at this point. So you're clearly out west, somewhere sunny, and I've got some sun for a change, which is really kind of nice. So Tini, you're kind of relatively new to the world of Marvel, right? You've been exclusive to us for almost 2 years now, right? Getting close to that.
Correct.
Okay, but you're not new to the world of comics. But I want I really want fans out there to get a sense of who you are, where you came from, and in particular, young writers that are looking to break in, that are looking to see what other roads there are, what roads people take, because everyone's road, even the ones that are really similar, are very, very different at some time. So, but first, I want to get into sort of your upbringing, where you grew up, and that kind of thing. Can you tell us a little bit about the early days of Tini Howard? Oh wait, also I need one other thing. Tini, where does the name come from? Okay.
It's just a nickname. I was born in the 80s, and there were 1,000 Christines and Christinas and Kristens and Kristas, and so at some point in elementary, middle school, I was like, we got to do something about this. And my friend started calling me Christini Martini, and the teeny part stuck.
I love it. I mean, it's funny because when I first heard your name, you were writing something for us, and I'd gotten the script, and I said Tini Howard, and with the name, I'm expecting someone. It's probably gonna be it's probably gonna be a very sort of shy and sort of just say. And then I met you, and you're not that. You know what I mean? It's like, whoa, no. It's Tini. So tell me a little bit about tell me a little bit about your upbringing. I mean, where did you grow up, and what was that like?
Sure. I grew up on the East Coast. I was born and raised in the DC metro area. I'm an only child, so I spent a lot of time self-entertaining. My parents are also pretty young too when they had me, so they were still kind of young and still really fun themselves. Mm-hmm. So I grew up with parents who were always, my mom wasn't a nerd, but she loved board games and movies and arts and crafts and fun stuff. So I was always really into that. And then my dad was a nerd. So I'm a second generation nerd. I grew up loving D&D and Star Wars and comics of a lot of kinds. But my dad never really read superhero comics. We did like cartoons. So I grew up reading a lot of comics and loving the medium of comics and reading all these like historical graphic novels. Like Larry Gonnick's Cartoon History of the Universe is the first comic I ever fell in love with.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would read books and books of newspaper comics and stuff. I mean, I just fell in love with the medium despite not really having superhero comics, which was weird because I was reading comics and I was watching, X-Men the Animated Series. I was watching like cartoons of superheroes and loving them. But it took me until I was like in like late high school, like early college, which is about 15 years ago at this point, I'll be honest, to have my husband and my friends be like, why don't you read superhero comics? And so they gave me some to try, and I was like, oh my God, this is not what I expected. It is a mythology. I mean, I grew up loving mythology. I grew up loving, pantheons. And once I really got into superhero comics, I was like, oh, they're so similar to that. These years and years of stories and then legends and an entire landscape that's been built. And I just, when I was younger, as a teenager, I'd written fan fiction or I'd written my take on things. Like I loved reading an existing world and thinking, what can I do to that? Like I'm so inspired by that. I want to do that too. And then so when I started reading superhero comics and I got really into it, I was like, this is such a and I started learning about the writers, and I learned you didn't have to be an artist to be a writer, which was to be a comic book writer. I thought, which was weird because like I was reading, like I went and read like Sandman at the library in high school over and over again. I'd read also things like Hellboy, where the artist was the writer in a lot of cases. So I think that's what I was used to. But I'd read comics like Sandman and Watchmen that were not, drawn and written by the same person. Right. Yeah. But for whatever reason, that didn't click for me. Mm-hmm. Am I having camera problems?
Yeah, you're freezing up. You're freezing up.
Can you hear me though? I'll keep talking and hopefully
I can hear you. Yeah, I mean,
that's a great picture of my face.
Yeah, you could. Try turning the camera on and off, the video on and off. See what happens.
Toggle it and see what that does for us.
The equivalent of unplugging it. There you go. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
So Sandman and you didn't realize that you could do one or the other.
Like it just didn't occur to me until honestly. I started reading, I started reading like New Avenger. I started reading a lot of Brian Michael Bendis comics, and I really felt with his writing.
Gosh. But then everything you read after that, was better, right? So you set the bar low, and then you.
So mean. No. And I read his comics and stuff, and I started going and looking like, who is this guy? Like, this writing is so fun, and I love it so much. And I was like, oh, he doesn't draw them. Of course, like all these other people. And from there, I realized, like, that was something you could do. And so that's something about my comics journey that I really impress on people is, like, there are people, obviously I've gone and I've read Brian's Words for Pictures and all these great books, and where he talks about wanting to make Spider-Man comics from the time he was a little kid. And that's so cool. I didn't have that because I didn't know that was an option for me. Right. Both for a lot of reasons, because frankly, as a little girl in the 80s and 90s, not every comic shop was super welcoming. And also because I just didn't, I wasn't involved in comic culture. Now, I think like nowadays there are so many amazing comic shops that are so welcoming to kids and people of all ages and walks of life that want to read comics. And I think about now, like if I had been near one of those comic shops as a kid, how different things might have been for me. But all that aside, if you want to make comics, you're, any age, and you just today watching this figured out, you don't have to write comics to draw them or draw comics to write them. Like that's cool. Like you can still follow the advice of make comics, read them, love them, figure out what it is about this medium that speaks to you. Because for me, literally, once I figured out that the bars I had put in place for myself weren't there was nothing else I wanted to do. Right.
Interesting. So what kind of writing did you start writing professionally at all? I mean, what was that road? I mean, I know you won a contest, but what was the road that led up to you hearing about this contest and then entering?
So I have been a writer of some kind my whole life, just because it's kind of what I naturally do, and left to my own devices is I make things up. I imagine things. Again, I was an only child. I grew up with young, imaginative parents. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time self-entertaining. You get really, really good at it. So I would, build up worlds in my head and build up stories, and I've always liked writing, and it's always something that I've gotten positive feedback on. My parents, my teachers were always like, "You're good at this," and I was like, "Cool," because I don't know how to do anything else.
How do I make money?
Yeah, exactly. Now, cool. Like now, the other kids are good at math. What do I do? So I have always been a writer. I wrote for fun. I've written for pleasure, and I've always thought in some capacity in the back of my mind that, I would write a book someday, or I would always, look at authors and be like, oh, that's the dream job, but I'm going to work at a desk forever, But so I once I had kind of decided that I really wanted to try writing comics, first of all, I'd been going to conventions for years as a fan, which I think was a really big help, because I remember going to, I lived in Virginia, and I remember going to a panel at Heroes Con in North Carolina and watching.
Great show, such a great show.
Yeah, and it was Matt Fraction, Kelly Sue Connick, Brian Bendis, and John Hickman all on a panel telling little baby me how to be a comic writer. It was awesome. It was exactly what I needed. And those panels and those experiences, having, because I was at conventions as a cosplayer. I was there as a fan. I was there in a Spider-Woman costume buying back issues. I was just there being a nerd. Realized this is a way, again, my mouth wide, but no, okay, it's working. This is a way to be part of this world that I really love, and to meet these people I really admire. I kind of changed my tune, and I started, packing something professional to wear along with my cosplay, so I could go talk to an editor and ask them what to do, or go talk to an artist and ask them to collaborate with me. And those were really vital too. So by the time the contest came around, I had written a few scripts that weren't very good. I had shared them. Did I lose you, or did you lose me?
Nope. Oh, you froze up.
Oh, we're good. Okay.
I can still hear you. You're just frozen.
Okay. Let me turn my camera off and on again for us. So I, by the time the contest came along, I'd been attending conventions. I had written a few scripts that weren't very good. I had cold approached some artists at cons that I liked. I mean, people like one of them was Megan Hetrick, who is a brilliant cover artist and painter. And one was Eric Donovan, who does a bunch of really cool punk rock comics now. But back when we were all just kids at tables, I walked up to them cold because I liked their art. And I literally, I mean, this is so embarrassing. I was literally just I'm a writer and I want to draw my comics and I like your art. And I think the other thing too that I always recommend when you're a young wannabe writer and you're going around talking to artists at cons, it helps to buy stuff. So even if it's just something cheap, I really like your art and I want to support you. And I think you're great. Also, thanks for your time, and buy at least a sticker or something.
Right.
Polite. Because you like your art, you want to support it. You can do that now with money. So yeah, I'd been going to cons, I'd been networking, I'd been writing scripts that weren't good. I had been approaching artists cold, which is terrifying. I had asked some of those artist friends if they would read my scripts, and they had given me nice, honest feedback that they weren't very good.
That's really what you need, right? You need the honesty, right?
You do. It's the most. You don't get better without it. Frankly, a lot of times people will like come to me and be like, "Oh, I feel like I'm stagnating" or whatever, and I'm like, "Are you taking notes and applying them?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then you won't stagnate. You'll get better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had been doing all these things, and then the contest came up, and I had also applied to a few anthologies and contests and things and gotten rejected. So it wasn't like it was my first script or my first attempt or my first except like it. I had.
Well, now it's not as impressive, Tini. It's just not as impressive. It wasn't the first time around. But this was for Top Cow, right? It was. I forgot to mention it was for Top Cow. Yeah.
Which I think was part of why I thought this would be another rejection, like all the others, was because I was like, well, this is the biggest thing I've applied to yet. This is an actual company. I had read like Witchblade and Magdalena and Darkness comics because in my not reading superhero comics, I read like a bunch of other stuff. So I had read like, Witchblade and Magdalena. I was like, I know these people. Like I've watched this TV show. Like this is,
right.
A big deal. And they're going to say no. I'm writing a character I've literally seen on TV. And they were like, they accepted it. They went with it. And it's,
so before you go further on that, you froze up again. Sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
Here we go. There we go.
Okay. So good. So now you enter this contest at Top Cow, and the prize is.
So the prize was they would publish your issue. They would do a talent hunt every year. They still do it some years. I think it's like every other year now. And you send in. I mean, and it was really uncommon to submissions in comics. I have very, very rarely been asked, "Hey, yeah, don't send us a pitch. Right. Don't send us an outline. Just send us a 20-page script of whatever you want." Like, wow. It does not happen. I mean, it had certain guidelines. Like, it had to be a frame story. It had to be about one of the artifacts. But It was otherwise really open.
So
isn't this wild?
So the script that you sent in that won the, I mean, what were they asking for? Again, the contestants were supposed to send in a full script or just like a sample of a scene, or how did that go? What did you send in basically?
Well, so what I sent in was what became Magdalena Seventh Sacrament, which was the first comic I ever wrote.
Okay.
But
there it is.
What the requirement? There it is. That beautiful romper. I love that cover. So what they had asked for was a frame story told by either Witchblade, Serafini, or The Darkness, Jackie, and then you had to have one of them telling a story about one of the magical artifacts in the Top Cow universe, and how it would. I think it just had to be that. It just had to be a story. It just had to be Witchblade or The Darkness telling a story about one of the artifacts. Now I broke like a lot of the rules, which. On one hand, it's kind of why I thought I won, but I can't encourage people to break the rules when the editor gives you rules. but I did. Like, it was like, right. It was like, don't introduce any new characters. Just use the ones we already have. There's a rich history. But what happened was I read the rich history of this artifact I wanted to use, and it was an artifact from, the time of the Bible, but the first time you saw it in their history was in like 1600s France. And I was like, well, how did it get there? And I was like, well, it got there how all those things got there, through the Crusades. So I wrote a story about the Crusades, and it went off really well. And I think it went off well because it was grounded in history, because it seemed to affect the real world without completely undoing, the things that real people had done. It just, incorporated the real world and felt real. But I mean, I did break so many rules, but I mean, I'll never forget. I was working at a coffee shop slinging lattes, and I walked out to my car at 10 p.m. after a shift, and I was sticky and covered in coffee and sour milk and vanilla syrup. And I sat in my car, and I was just like, oh, I just want to go home and cry. And I turned my phone on, and I had an email saying I'd won the contest.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah. I mean, and I was like, oh, okay.
That's awesome. That's got to be an amazing feeling,
It was. I mean, I carry that feeling with me every day. Every time I get a script and I'm like, I'm too tired to write. It's like, but remember when
you were all sticky and covered in coffee and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel really lucky every day to do what I do. So.
But the other thing that is impressive is it's not just winning a contest, right? It's then winning that contest and parlaying it into a career, which is what you've done, right? So now you go from writing Magdalena, and then you start getting involved in other projects, right? So, you did Hack Slash. with Tom Steele, right? And then you worked on something called Assassinistas, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? I love the name.
Yeah, so thank you. I love making up words for titles.
And this is with Gilbert Hernandez. Your artist is Gilbert Hernandez.
Yeah, the Hall of Famer, the legend himself. So, funny story about that.
Now you're relatively new to comics here. You're working with Gilbert Hernandez. That's awesome.
Yeah. So the story behind that was I had taken that Magdalena book, and I mean, I had really done a couple of years of if you're a video gamer, you understand the term grinding, of just going to every con I could with a portfolio in my hand and being polite with editors and taking every meeting I could. I mean, I had like a 10-year career in boring office marketing work before I, was really able to parlay that into a career in comics. Which, the reason I was serving lattes was because I left my responsible adult job to go make lattes so I would have more time to write comics. The fact that it happened to pay off is lucky.
Well, again, I'm not a big believer in luck. I think you put yourself in those positions. It's there's certain good fortune, that comes your way. But I think hard work pays off. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So you left your job.
Thank you. No, it's fine. Yeah. So I'm going around and I'm doing a lot of, I did a lot of licensed work, but because I grew up reading stories and thinking about how to put myself into them anyway, I still did my best work and put my heart into all that licensed work. And some of it was stuff I really, really love. Like I got to write stories for WWE. I got to write stories for Rick and Morty. I got to write stories for all these things that I really, really love. And it was amazing. So at IDW, I started working with Shelley Bond. Oh, there's Glow, which is one of the awesome things I got to write.
Yeah.
So I'm at IDW, I wasn't at IDW yet. I was kind of in a place where I didn't really know what to do. I had done a bunch of license work. I wanted to do a creator-owned book or something that felt more like me, but I'd only done one creator-owned book in the past, and it was a really short, very indie project. So I was like, I still don't really feel like I know what I'm doing to do a big creator-owned project. And out of the blue, on the phone, calls Shelley Bond, who...
Yeah. Yep.
And she called me up and was like, I read some of your writing. I think it's fantastic, and I want to do a book with you. And I was like, oh my God. So with that, I pitched her five.
Right there. That's not luck, right? I mean, luck would be if she just like butt dialed you and somehow had your number on her phone, right? She read your work. You put yourself out there. You made your work public. You worked hard to get to that point. And Shelley Bond, who again, is a legend through, from the Vertigo days, contacts you and says, "I think you've got a voice. I think you've got something." So, again, I'm proven correct. Sorry.
I'll take it. I'll take the compliment. So she called me up and was like, "I want to do a book with you," and I was absolutely floored. So I pitched her 5 ideas that were just here are things that I can't get out of my head that I want to write books about. And the first one we decided to do together was Assassinistas, which is great because it was a lot more complex, or a lot less complex than some of the other ideas. It's essentially, there's no wizards or spaceships in it. It's just a family story about it's about a family of bounty hunters, and it's about the second generation of these kids who are the children of these women who were basically these Charlie's Angels, can we say badass on this show?
Yeah.
Bad butts.
You can now. But don't go further, because if not,
we'll just stay with that.
YouTube will ban this episode. It's happened.
So, fun. That's a goal. So I talked to Shelly, and I was talking about I put the book together, and I kind of had written a lot of the story, and I was like, I can't go any farther until we have an artist. As a writer, I get to a point where I'm I can't write anymore until I know what I'm seeing, or I prefer to, especially with a creator-owned thing where you're building it full clock. So we're talking about artists, and she sends me an email. It was just like Assassinistas, which also that title took us forever to get to. I went through so many bad titles, and
awesome
then
title.
thank you. In one of the pitch paragraphs, I had referred to the main characters as Assassinistas, and
Right.
Shelley Bond was like, "That's a good word.
Yeah.
Is that a real word?" And I was like, "I think I made it up." So
What were some of the
she sent
bad
me an email.
titles? Do you have any of those?
The working title was Beautiful Sons, which is a terrible title. It doesn't tell you anything
Yeah,
about the book, but it
not at
was
all.
about the second generation of kids. So in my head, I was calling it Beautiful Sons.
Yeah. But Assassinista does that thing that it's that Stan Lee rule, right? That the name of a character should tell you exactly who the character is in terms of like
Exactly.
superheroes, right? Their powers and stuff. So
Yeah.
so this Assassinista nails it, I think, perfectly.
Yeah, girl assassins. You know, right off the beginning. Um, so she sent me an email, and it just says Assassinistas, and the body of the email is, "How about Gilbert Hernandez?" And I basically emailed her back like, "Well, he's gonna say no, and now I'm gonna be disappointed by whatever else he proposed."
Right.
So I kind of wish she hadn't said that and just asked him without telling me. But okay, like he's gonna say no. I'll steel myself for the bummer for I don't know, cartoons that can stand up to her Hernandez brother. Like,
Right.
and she's like, he's in. He loves it.
Wow.
And it's wonderful. I've gotten to work with him. I've gotten to meet his whole family. They're all delightful. They're all incredibly brilliant and creative and talented people. His daughter is like one of the coolest human beings I've ever met in my life. And yeah, I mean, I talked to him on the phone just the other day, and he's so kind to work with. He's always said that he doesn't draw other people's scripts, like almost ever.
Huh.
Like almost, the Hernandez brothers almost never draw anyone else's scripts. They draw their own stuff.
Yeah.
But he was just like, I liked this story a lot. And I was really glad to have him working on it because he was someone that got what I was trying to do with it, which is like, it's a family story. So I was like, there are so many artists who would do amazing machine guns and amazing slick, things that look like video game levels where everyone's laying on their bellies holding up sniper rifles. That's so cool. But that's not this book.
Okay.
This book is about like the family and the point of view of the kids who see this as kind of retro and kind of weird. This doesn't seem like a thing that makes sense to them. So it was really important to have this art style that was kind of retro, kind of stylized, kind of very clearly a comic book world, because the perspective of the main characters is you can't go around shooting people. That's only something you do in comic books. So him as the cartoonist just brought everything to light. Him having, I mean, when you think of cartoonists that can just say so much between two characters with a glance, you can't do much better than a Hernandez. Like,
Yeah. Now you're working with literally with a living legend from the comics industry. Did you write full
literal
script?
Hall of Famer.
Did you write full script for him?
I did.
So
But-
go ahead. Go ahead.
But it so, I mean, writing full script for him was like great because it's like, I wouldn't, like, some artists I'll be like, they're like, oh, I like lots of visual rep, I like lots of specificity. Whereas like with the Hernandez brother, you can be like, she looks at him like she just smelled cookies baking, and you get exactly what you want. Like they're just that good.
Yeah.
So I wrote full script, but it's like, I remember the scripts being really sparse because I just wanted it to be about exactly what was going on, and it's not the kind of book, and he's not the kind of artist where you're like, okay, this is a super deep field shot with all these armies coming in the background. It's like,
Yeah.
you don't, it's a waste of that artist to write like that for Hernandez. And so I wrote full script, but there are also lots of things where he was like, hey, I changed this because
That's what I was going
of
to ask you.
whatever.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
As a new writer, and him being a seasoned pro, I'm sure there's certain things where he may just say, "Hey, can we try X, Y, and Z?" So, were there a lot of learning? Were there a lot of examples where you learned something about your craft as a writer based upon what he was adding in as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, Gilbert was probably the artist where I really learned to work with artists.
Okay.
Because I learned, and not in the sense of like how to corral an artist, like that's not how you work with artists, I think. And when I say learn to work with artists, I mean learn to work with them as a collaborator and look up to them as a collaborator and respect them. And I don't know, I heard a phrase for it recently, but I can't remember it now. But you know, when you give someone what they're good at so they can do their best, and they do the same for you.
Yeah.
And that really worked, working with Gilbert. And it was also like learning to adapt and learning to, like, when he jams out, and it takes the story somewhere I didn't expect, learning to look at that and assess it before just saying, that's not what I wanted. Look at it and assess it and understand, you know, the artist is enhancing my story in ways that might have been weak. And even if putting in his connection to the characters, which is vital, and the book would not be what it is, nor would it exist at all without. So definitely working with Gilbert, working with a Hall of Fame artist will teach you to work with artists, but he could not have been more humble and cool. Yeah. There were one or two moments where I would like go to Shelly, was like terrified, because I would be like, Shelly, I actually need this part changed, and I cannot tell Gilbert Hernandez to change something. She's like, oh, I can. I'm an editor.
Right. She's the editor.
She's like, I've done it.
Yeah. I'm sure Gilbert was like, okay, sure, you know.
He just could not have been. At no point did he remind me who he was, despite myself reminding myself who he was every time I worked with him, who he is. Yeah. Every time I work with him, he's. Yeah, I mean, it was amazing to be able to work with a legend like that at the point in my career, to be able to have that be my second creator-owned project. And that was really Shelly. That was Shellys gift as someone who has the number of everyone in comics, and was just able to put that together because she had that skill as an editor to be like, no one else would put these two together, but I think they'd make a book together. Yeah, and she was right.
That's awesome. So you had another creator-owned project, right? Euthonauts?
Mm-hmm.
And again, another great title, a great name. Is that yours too? Did you come up with that?
Yeah, I did. Because they are astronauts of death, but they only there through euthanasia. So they're euthonauts. They are people who can explore the afterlife with voluntary death.
Wow.
It's a little bit dark material.
Yeah.
But
was this your first creator own, or was this come after?
This is my third.
Okay.
This was the more complex one. So after Shelly and I did Assassinista, we were like, let's do another book. And we had decided to go with, this was the idea that I pitched first, that everyone at IDW had liked. The higher ups were like, this is the best one. This is what we want to do. But it was super complex. It was really nebulous and weird. So we were like, let's do another book first to kind of see how we work together. And then we'll see how this goes. So we decided to do Euthonauts. And by the time we decided to actually move on Euthonauts, we had already fallen head over heels in love with Nick Robles, who's the artist. Marvel fans probably know him. He did a short called My Drag Brunch with Loki. That was like really cute. Yeah. But he is an absolutely incredible artist.
Yeah, the art is amazing in the book. It really is.
And I mean that whole book that was probably the most collaborative creator-owned project I've done, where Nick and I were talking all the time. We were both in love with the characters. There were moments where there are romantic moments in that book that happened that weren't expected, but Nick and I were like, do you feel like these characters are into each other? Because I do. It was just so collaborative. There was an issue that I was really struggling with. I think I rewrote it like 3 times and then sent it to Nick to draw because he had to draw it. I was still like not entirely happy with it, because that happens in comics more than we're artists, we're writers, we're never happy with our own work. And Nick drew the pages, and I remember when he sent me the PDF of the pencils, he was like, this issue works better if I move the pages around, I think. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. Like that book was so collaborative, which is necessary because it was so hard to write. It's really dark material. But in a weird way, like, I don't know, like that's who I am. That's what fascinates me. I'm a little goth. That kind of guides me. So it was really liberating to have an artist who also was like, I make beautiful stuff, but I want to make beautiful stuff about this dark thing that is haunting and meaningful to us. And it was really special. I've had people read that book and be really, really kind to me about what it taught them about death and dying and grief. And I've had dear friends read that book and be like, I wish you would have warned me how dark that is, because it put me in a bad place for days. Well,
I got to
I knew I wasn't full when Scott Snyder read that book and was like, this is good. I was like, oh, it is dark. Like,
right.
Scott writes dark stuff.
I mean, I love the whole package too. I mean, I think from the logo to the covers and to the interiors and, and the concept. Yeah, it's dark, but it really is sort of lyrical and beautiful,
Thank you. And then, Philip Bond, the legendary Philip Bond, who's another artist I love very much. He did that logo. He did the Assassinistas logo as well. That was one of the really cool things about doing books with Shelly and Black Crown, was you get Philip Bond logos and Philip Bond book designs. So everything looks super cool. And
It does.
Mod,
So now this sort of road leads you to Marvel, right? And how did you end up at Marvel? And your first project actually is a Captain America annual, like set in World War II. So how did you get there?
Well, Alana and Tom reached out to me. And it's funny, like, so
they just, so this was just sheer luck as well, right? They just sort of like they butt dialed
sheer
you?
luck, yeah. They picked me out of the phone book. No, I guess they'd read some of my work. I think Alana had read Assassinistas actually, and they sent me an email just saying, hey, we really like your work and we'd like you to write an annual. And I kind of found out later that year that there were a lot of people, like Saladin Ahmed, I think his first Marvel work was in that run of annuals. So it felt kind of like maybe there was a moment where some of the editors were like, let's do some tryouts with these annuals.
It's a good place, to break in new writers, in a lot of ways. See what their voices are like on our characters. So it does make sense. So tell me a little bit about this first Cap story, and so you get the call, right? And are you nervous? Are you like, I got this? What's that like?
Email and I think I screamed and like showed my husband. Also, because my husband, I love Captain America, but like that's also his like favorite. He like cosplayed Captain America and everything. Like he loves Captain America, so I was like, no pressure. But I love Cap too, and I love war stories. So I was really excited because part of why Alana reached out to me was because she was like, I kind of want to do like, I don't know, like a Band of Brothers-y thing. Are you familiar with Band of Brothers? And I was like, I love Band of Brothers. It's one of my favorite TV shows. Like, I would love to do that. So Alana, because it was my first Marvel work, Alana was really good about being like, here are some loose beats we'd like to hit. We want to do a World War II story. We would love to have him, defending some people that, are finding themselves, in need of a hero. And so we decided to do this, and Alana was super helpful. Like we guided all this and came up with it together. But we decided that it was going to be a story about Cap and Bucky. Happening on a bunch of people who were escapees from a camp that had been recently not liberated, but had sort of just fallen into disarray as the regime fell. And so Cap and Bucky find them, but they're sort of holed up in a cabin avoiding some German soldiers. And they have to protect them and get them through the night and get them to safety. It's like a really simple Cap story. It is like absolutely simplistic, which is part of why it was so. It was such a gift, to be able to write something like that, because to be given for my first Marvel work, like here is literally the of like here's a classic Marvel character, the height of all Marvel heroes, in my opinion. I mean, my favorite is this guy, but I recognize. Cap's
Wait, hold that up again. I couldn't see it. Okay. Got it.
My favorite's Iron Man, but I love Cap, and I recognize that Cap is, the ultimate hero. So to be able to have, for my first Marvel work, just 30 pages to do what I felt like was like some of the most classic Marvel storytelling you can do, like Captain America saving the day. To be able to do that in a way that felt like fresh and meaningful and personal, and to be able to like step out of the gate and talk to Marvel fans like that, who were people I felt connected to already because I was a Marvel fan, was really cool. And then I was really nervous. My husband read it and he loved it, and I was like, okay, he's the picky fan. So
would he be honest with you? Would he tell you, Tini, no?
He would. He absolutely would. He wouldn't say it was bad, but he would probably be like, I'll read it later if he read it and didn't like it.
Oh, all right. So the passive aggressive, and then it's reminding him, did you read it yet? Did you read it yet? Have you read it yet? Oh, you didn't like it. That's what happened, right?
No, he's always super kind and supportive. But yeah, it was really meaningful, and it was incredible. I mean, the response to it, I still get like emails, and like I had an email from like a little, I guess when it went on Marvel Unlimited, I got an email from a teenage girl in Japan who was just like, what did she say? She was just like, I really like Captain America, and it was cool to like learn about American history, and like the story was really sad, but like it ended happy. And it was just like a really sweet, like teenage girl email. And I was like, man, I should have sent emails like that when I was a teenage girl starting to read Marvel comics and really liking them. Like, it made my day. It made me feel so good. And I was just like, this is awesome. I want to keep being part of this. And so I've been able to keep being part of this.
Yeah, that's great. And you and I sort of cross paths a little bit.
That's right.
You did an issue of the Marvel Knights 20th anniversary, right? That was sort of a Donny Cates constructed project, and and that's actually that's the first time I actually read one of your scripts, and I was like, oh wow. This gal's got some chops here. This is good stuff, because Donnie sort of handpicked everybody he wanted, right? So tell me a little bit about that project, how that came about for you on your end. I mean, I know how it came about on Donnie's end, but for you.
Yeah, no, so Donnie and I had been buddies just through cons and comics and mutual friends and getting to know each other. And I had done, I'd done the one Marvel thing. And then, in comics, there's often a lot of like, you'll hear like someone will say, hey, like, I heard an editor's doing this. I'll drop your name in for it, but maybe you don't hear anything back, and that's okay. It's part of what happens. You're like, okay, thanks. If I hear back from them, cool. If I don't, then you put my name in, and they went another way, whatever. But then Donnie reached out to me about the Marvel Knights thing, and I was really excited because it was Donnie, who is a buddy of mine, and then it was Matt Rosenberg and Vita Ayala. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is like summer camp. This is my buddies. And it was fun because Donnie and I are both super like intense.
Donnie, you think Donnie's intense? You think I don't know. He always seems so laid back to me. Yeah.
I love it because he makes me look laid back.
Donnie literally vibrates. Like he's like vibrating at like a intense frequency at all times. Sometimes more intense than others. So I've never seen Donnie ever be laid back. So
yeah, and I think I remember like we were texting about this stuff, and it was like probably like late at night, and I think we were finally like, let's just get on the phone. And I think we had like a 3-hour, like probably like 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. like 3-hour like middle of the night phone call.
And how many times did he say?
I'm gonna tell you.
How many times did he say rad?
Plot of Marvel. What?
How many times did he say rad during that conversation?
I think dope came up a lot too.
Oh, dope! It's dope. Yes, I'm sorry, not rad. Dope. That's his word.
Dope.
Yeah, it's gonna be dope. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's gonna be dope. But we had like a 3-hour middle of the night phone call about Marvel Knights and about the original stuff and about what we wanted to do and about what he had in mind and about where all it came from. And we had fun geeking out about all the little Easter eggs. He'd be like, oh, this thing is from this thing. And I was like, yeah, I read that issue. I loved it. So we like geeked out about all of that. And then he was like, yeah, and I want you to write the Punisher issue. And I was like, I thought you were going to ask me to write Elektra, but good on you. I like Elektra. I would have written Elektra just fine. But one thing I've always really been grateful of at Marvel is that like I like all of Marvel's characters, not just the female ones. Mm-hmm. So I've always been really grateful that like no one at Marvel has ever been like, you can only write girls. Like I've been offered Captain America and Punisher and all these heroes who I'm like, yeah, I love them too. Thank you for letting me tell my stories about them because I have stuff to say about them too. Mm-hmm. So Donnie was like, "I want to read a Punisher issue," and I was like, "Okay." And I remember, and this part of the script I remember was one of my favorite parts, but this was all Donnie, and I got to credit him for it. The one thing Donnie said he really wanted was he was like, and he gets out of the shower and he draws the skull and the steam on the window on the mirror, and that was like all he really wanted. He was like, "Oh, also he doesn't know he's the Punisher still, and he has to figure it out. Do whatever you want there." But he draws the skull in the fog, in the mirror, in the bathroom, and I was like, "That's cool." And then I was like, "Yeah, I want to." And then I was like, we got into this whole conversation of who would Frank be if he didn't know, and I was like, I think he would like have a girlfriend and like be normal, and he's like a cop, and he, and so it was really fun to write this story that was just seeing Frank Castle, one, as not the Punisher, but still the Punisher, like knowing that that's in him, but that there's this like ice cream cake over it that's just slowly melting, and like sooner or later Frank's gonna come out. But then also having him consistently frustrated and unsettled by the people in the Marvel universe that he had to seek for a mystery. So he goes to these people like Iron Man and Loki and the Scarlet Witch, who are like notoriously like, people think it's weird that I consider Iron Man in this, but he's a futurist. He's not.
Right.
Them. How do I make their lives worse?
Yeah.
To give them something to solve, So, with that, it kind of became the way we wrote Marvel Knights was kind of each of the chapters was a chapter in a story, but it was also kind of meant to focus on one character. Mm-hmm. So the Frank chapter is also really fun because I got to write Bruce Banner, which I had never done. And it's so funny. It's like every time, and it was the first time I got to write Tony Stark too. It's like every time it's the first time to put words in one of these characters' feet. Like on the Captain America story, I remember I did another pass at one point because Alana read the script and was like, "Bucky says everything. Cap doesn't really say anything." And I was like, "Yeah, it's more intimidating to put words in Cap's mouth, so I made Bucky say everything." She was like, "Okay, well, Cap should talk to you." I was like, "Okay." So I'll give him. And it became a better script because it became more about, the relationship between Bucky and Cap became clearer and their motivations became clearer. It was better writing. Alana's a good editor. She's a great editor. And that was kind of the biggest fun of that Marvel Knights script was getting to do the unexpected of write all these characters together and write them, with a clear and sudden struggle and confusion, it's fun to write people go nuts and make murder blenders for pages, but whenever I get a character first, my first thought is like, well, how do we challenge it?
Right. Cool. Then so now you
with monsters.
What was that?
I said, and sometimes that's with monsters and they make murder blenders. That's okay too.
Right. So that you become exclusive to Marvel. And I remember meeting you for the first time and thinking, Tini is someone that would fit right in to the big summit meetings with all the writers, because you're certainly not an introvert, and your personality felt really like perfect for the sort of the Marvel system, the Marvel mix. So you become exclusive. You also do a book for us called Strike Force, correct? Mm-hmm. So tell us about Strike Force, because then we're going to get into the X of it all.
Yeah. Okay. So Strike Force. Let's see. So in the interim at Marvel, I had done a Thanos book, I did a Death's Head book, and I did a Belly book, all of which were miniseries. The Thanos book felt like a huge level up because it came out the week of Endgame, so it was a book that had like a huge amount of eyes on it. That was really scary, but I had a great time writing it. And so by the time I'd written 3 miniseries, I felt like pretty stable at Marvel. Like I knew what I was doing, I knew how to pitch things, and then Strike Force. So Strike Force was one of those things that like I don't know how many times I'll get to do something like this in my life, so I went completely to the wall with it, where it was basically like, we want to do this team book. We had these Strike Force teams during War of the Realms, and we think that we could do something cool with that concept. And I was like, yeah. And then there was some characters suggested that were just kind of, here's some random characters that we like that aren't being really used right now. And I was like, what if I pick all these other characters that I like that aren't being used right now? So the biggest question I get about Strike Force is like, why the team? What a weird team. And there is, there are complex writer answers, there are good in story answers, but the basic reason of it was I was told to make a team of characters, so I picked characters that I liked and wanted to write.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, it kind of became this best of a lot of comics that were some of my favorites, like, these characters like Angela and Monica Rambeau and Wiccan and Damon Hellstrom and Spider-Woman. Spider-Woman is one of my all-time faves. And Blade, who were characters that I was like, when I thought of them and I made a list of just characters I liked, I started thinking of characters that would go together and why. And there's a joke in Strike Force 7 about how they're all, there's something about them that's like, they're a little bit monstrous. Mm-hmm. But the approach to the book, instead of, okay, I want these to be an official strike force that, the Avengers say, go out, you guys are sanctioned, you do that, or to have them be, I was like, well, I want them to be, I want this, my original pitch for the book was, I was like, they can be like Asgard's X-Force, right? Like they go handle Asgard stuff that, they can't, the big guys can't know about. And then I started dealing with Asgard and thinking about it. And like, I love fantasy. I love the nebulousness of fairy magic and mythology and all that. So I was like, well, what if the problem is not that they're doing a thing for the Avengers, but it's that they're doing something they have to keep from the Avengers? And then the why of that became because the knowledge of it is mimetic and the knowledge of it is dangerous. And like, these are like a race of fairy shapeshifters. So if you know about them, they can take your form and they can capture you and swap you like a changeling. So then, because originally my first pitch was, okay, they'll go fight vampires. And then that was like when, as Jason's amazing, right before War of the Realms was when Jason's amazing Vampires in Transylvania, Dracula plot with Blade had happened. I love those books so much. And we're like, well, this is Jason's Vampires. And I was like, okay, fair enough. We won't do vampires. We'll do something else. So we came up with I came up with changelings and this idea of the Bridai. And so the other fun of that was I was like, I'm going to create a villain race at Marvel, which is like, it's always fun because I have had that once or twice now where like a character I created shows up in like a friend's book or another writer's book. And I'm like,
is that awesome when that happens? Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good feeling. So I created this whole villain race, and from there, Strike Force, so much of it came out of the writing of it. Like, as I was writing it, I was like, oh, this is also a story about continuing some of the things in Death's Head about how, Wiccan felt unsure about his role in the world, and like, we're working with shapeshifters. So Spider-Woman has this great fear element here because she famously is obviously terrified of shapeshifters because she almost ruined the whole world being being replaced by one. Right. And like Angela has this knowledge of, the mysteries of the, the 10 realms that, that the others don't. And Blade is an expert monster killer. Writing Blade and Angela together became this great dual team where she is all the knowledge, but some of that knowledge seems nebulous and mysterious and weird. So Blade has to be like, do I trust this fairy crap or do I just cut its head off because I'm Blade? So much of that book became in the writing of it and just spending time with those characters and figuring out really organically, this is what you were just served. Now what? How do we challenge you moving out of that and coming out of that? And it's been a blast. It's so much fun to write Strike Force, and the fan response has been wild.
It really has. So now this leads us to the craziness that is Excalibur and the new X-Men launch with Jonathan Hickman, who really is a mad scientist when you come to think about it.
He'd be the Rick by Morty.
So Jonathan, is going to assemble his dream team of people, and again, you get a call, right, to be a part of this thing. What made you want to bring the idea of magic sort of into the X world, or was that something that Jonathan pitched to you and said, I want a magic book? How did that turn out?
So my question to you is, can either of us ever really picture Jonathan Hickman saying, I want magic in this?
Listen, when he pitched this X-Men idea originally, we were all like, I don't know if we could do this, but eventually the sort of the timing, and the zeitgeist caught up with it, and we were like, let's go. And it's really brought the X-Men back to prominence. It's something different. It's fresh, but it's X-Men. So the magic thing came from you, right? You said, I want to. Okay.
Yeah, so like one thing I really like about working at Marvel now is, and like that I've been here for a little while, is that I don't feel like every time I get an idea I have to like run to an editor. Like I can sit there and be like, like I have characters I want to write, I have ideas, but they're not ready yet. I'm still mulling. I want to get that pitch and that concept and that take perfect before I send it in. The really funny short story about how I got asked to write X-Men was I had been writing for Marvel for a little bit, and I actually had just talked or maybe seen a tweet or something from my friend Ed Brisson talking about how like, once you start working here, people will just like send you their crazy ideas. It's kind of a thing. It's kind of weird. It happens ever. And I was like, yeah, it happens. So then I checked my email like maybe that day or maybe the next day, and I have an email from some weird email that I don't recognize. And it's a long walk. Like, who is this crazy person sending me their absolutely wild X-Men ideas? And I scrolled real fast to the bottom of the email, and I was like, oh. And by that point, I had heard the same rumblings as everyone else that Jonathan was going to be writing the X-Men, and that no one knew who he was going to be asking. And I was like, me? So I read everything, and to be clear, one of the things I really, really liked about Jonathan reaching out to me was that he was like, if you don't like this, say no. Right. He's like, if you read my take and you think it's dumb, say no, thank you, and I will find someone else. I mean, that's I want everyone to be really in on this.
Yeah, that's how he approached us.
That's always.
Yeah, when he brought the take to us, he was like, if it sucks, just tell me. We don't have to do it. I just, it's my take. And the thing about Jonathan, I remember my first experience meeting Jonathan at the Writers' Summit where he first came in, and he had stacks of Moleskine books. I'm sure you've seen this, right? And I look over his shoulder, and he's writing and sketching and going through these and the handwriting is tiny and perfect and lined up, and I'm like, this guy, thank God he's a writer, because he's either a writer or he's a Unabomber. I mean, I don't know what's going. He's a mad scientist, clearly, but he has, he plots out his stories for years. And everything is intricate and interlocked. So yeah, I mean, I know that pitch that you got, and it was amazing. So he says, if you don't like it, you don't have to do it, right?
Yeah, and not only did I really like specifically that, I in general like really wild pitches. Like I tend to be the person that when you hear about a weird idea in something, I'm like, well, that could work, and if it works, it'll be great. So I read it and I was really in on it. And he basically said, I said I was in on it. And he said, cool, here's some NDAs and stuff, and we'll see you in the room in a little bit. But in the meantime, come to the room with some pitches. So it was kind of like I had been chosen as a writer, and it was like, I'm sure if it wouldn't have worked out, they would have switched me out for someone else. But Jonathan was kind of like, I want you as a writer to work on this before I was like, here's my book idea, which was really cool because we all got to get in a room together and talk about that and figure that out. But what I came to the room with was I had like a loose pitch for one book I kind of wanted to do that kind of became something else that might happen later. And then a kind of an essay, like a weird essay about how mutants had been able to, if mutants were able to live in peace as a nation, truly defended and not on the run and being attacked and not having it be constantly questioned like Utopia, and not on the purview of any other country, like Utopia was part of San Francisco technically and all that. What would they do? And like, how would their culture build? And part of that for me was the idea of magic. And there's a lot about it that I won't get too into about why I picked magic, but it's because it's something that develops in most cultures, like this idea of it. It's kind of universal. And so I wrote this whole essay about why I thought mutant magic and the development of it would be a thing and a story, and why I thought Apocalypse would be the guy to do it. And that I kind of read that and shared that, and John and Jordan and I all looked at each other, and at the same time we're like, and this should be Excalibur, because it's magic, you know. We were like, yeah, and then we were like, that's what we do with Betsy Braddock, like we put her in this, and then through those discussions we were like, okay, well, if Captain Britain has always led Excalibur and Betsy Braddock is now Captain Britain, how do we get there and how do we make it meaningful? And so what I came in to the X Room with was not a list of characters, a pitch, a directive, anything. What I came into that room with was an essay on how to run a nation of fictional people, and we made it into a book. And it was, the first X Room was electric. Every X Room since has been electric. They are some of the most amazing creative. It's not like we just sit around cutting up. Like we work right. hard. We get mad at each other, but that kind of creative juice, I mean, you just can't buy it. It's like nothing else. Yeah. It's like lightning. It feels so good.
Yeah, every creative room, I mean, especially the really good ones, you're going to have arguments. Yeah. You're gonna butt heads. But what makes it a great room is that when you break for lunch, you go and you hang out, and it's if you know, hey, you know, just you disagreed on something, but it makes for better product. If everybody agreed, then you're going to end up probably with a really lame, stale global story. You know, so but speaking of Apocalypse, right? So you know, you got Apocalypse on your team. How difficult was it for you to reconcile him as a good guy, right? I mean, and also to have other characters accept him. I mean, it's not easy for a lot of the characters. Yeah. It's not easy for me as a reader to still believe that Apocalypse doesn't have, you know, another shoe to drop somewhere down the road. Maybe he does, right? But for you right. as a writer, you know, how did you go about this?
So, I love immortals. I love really old character vampires. I love super long-lived characters are really fascinating to me.
Hey, Tini, I'm sorry. Tini, could you repeat that?
Let me turn my camera on and back off.
No, you're fine. Your sound just clipped. We missed that first sentence.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
I really love immortality. I love long-lived characters. I love vampires. There's something really fascinating to me about someone who's had thousands of years to just get good at all the stuff we try and get good at. And I think a lot about like their mindset and what kind of person they would be. And so I really liked Apocalypse when I thought about him on that kind of timeline. And it worked out because, and I don't want to say too much because the X Room, we work on a long timeline, and there's stuff that, you know, we work on a very long timeline. Jonathan plans everything out very far in advance, and then talking to him, you end up doing it too. Jonathan and I realized really early on that we had desires to tell the same kind of story about Apocalypse. That we were kind of thinking of the same thing, and that the beats I had thought of complemented his stories, and the beats he had thought of complemented my story. And so that through line of Apocalypse on the island became really central both to my book and Jonathan's story, as we've seen so far. And I think we'll see going forward. He was someone who I thought was like the most fascinating villain to come to the island. I mean, we see all the villains come to the island, and that was something that also John really impressed upon us in the first room, was like, part of the fun of this is getting to see the good guys and the bad guys having to live together in harmony. Yeah. There's that whole big, beautiful moment in Hoxpox where Apocalypse tells all the villains, like, come on, let's go. But I think I really read that scene as him being like, we have a chance to all be great. And it's important. I won't say whether or not you guys should believe Apocalypse.
No, we don't want to know. We don't want to know.
Yeah, I won't say whether or not you should, but like any crazy genius, I have to really believe in him when I'm writing him. Like And I do, like, I love writing the pages in Excalibur that are his grimoire pages that are just, and I really, really get into a mindset. I listen to this like heavy, doomy music, and I think about, I one of his grimoire pages I wrote after listening to hours of like an Alan Moore TED Talk where he was talking about the nature of magic. And like, yeah, like, I mean, it wasn't him talking about comics at all. It was him talking about Alan Moore stuff. And after I came away from that, I was like, I got to go write Apocalypse. And I get into this mindset where I think about, 10,000 years of being alive. And I think about experiencing everything humans can experience over and over and over again, and experiencing them with the power.
Right. Right. Well, I gotta tell you, he's fascinating in the book, but I do have to ask you. He asked to be called by, I guess, his mutant name. How do you pronounce that? Literally,
You don't.
How do you pronounce it?
You
don't.
You're a human. You don't. So yeah, that was in the room early on. I said, let's do things in Krakoan that don't have a translation because our readers are all human. Mm-hmm. So no reader of ours will ever be able to read it because they're not mutants. And everyone said, sit down, baby Morrison. Everyone said, you're not Grant Morrison, settle down. Except for Jonathan, who said, I'll make you a special symbol. Right. I think everyone thought the idea was crap except for Jonathan.
It's what he does.
He was like, oh, it's weird and you want a special symbol? Let's do it. So I was like, and it was important to me that it was like, he has a name that can't be said by human tongues, basically. Like it's an old concept. It's a silly fantasy concept, but I love the idea of true names. The book talks a lot about Betsy's identity. Mm-hmm. In the first issue, a lot of people talk about their names and if they're taking new names on the island or not, because we have this whole new language. And so I really wanted a moment where Apocalypse was just like, among my people, I have a name that humans cannot say because no human has a reason to ever say my name ever again. Forget them. We have our own place now, you know? So it was kind of like, it's kind of like when, like sometimes when people move to another country and they feel like maybe their name is hard to pronounce, they'll say, okay, well, you can use this name for me here. Mm-hmm. And that always kind of like, sometimes it bums me. I mean, sometimes people do it for their own choice, but sometimes I'm like, well, what's your name? Like, should I call? And so people have such, I'm Tini because there are too many Christines.
I was
right?
going to say, it's baked in. It's baked in.
We choose names and identities for ourselves. And so to me, there was something really, it's hard to get moments that feel heartwarming out of Apocalypse, but not for me. For whatever reason, I like him and I get him. And for me, there was something vulnerable about saying, call me by this name, mutants, or you die. Right. It's him saying, I no longer have a need to be around the people who are our oppressors and who call me this name that means the end of days. Like, I'm not the end of days. I'm the beginning of a new, beautiful era for us. Don't call me this human name. Maybe I'm the Apocalypse for them, but for us, I'm a brother and I'm a scholar. That's awesome. And so he wants a name that doesn't mean end of days. And so he chooses a name that can't be said by humans.
So now, again, Excalibur, has some wonderful twists and turns. One of the big ones is a new Captain Britain, which was the big reveal at the end of issue 1, I believe. So here's Betsy. She's in full uniform. It's a great design. So this was part of the big master plan, right? That you came in with.
You cut off for a second, but I think you're just asking about
so
the design
so
and
Captain
the idea stuff, right?
Yeah, Captain Britain. Betsy's Captain Britain. This was part of the big master plan. One of the things that you wanted to accomplish.
Yeah. So one of the big obvious questions I get about writing Excalibur and Captain Britain is that why aren't you English? Great question. Neither was Kitty Pryde. um, or Nightcrawler. But the reason for that is like because Excalibur and Captain Britain and all that leans heavily into the otherworld mythology and the magic, and that was really obviously there's plenty of stuff about being Captain Britain, but like really I'm less writing about the experience of what it's like to defend England and to defend Britain because I'm not British, and that's not entirely what this Excalibur book is. What it is about is feeling torn between two lands. Betsy is Captain Britain, but she doesn't live in England. She lives on an island with a bunch of mutants, and there are people in England that don't like that, that feel like their protector should be one of them, not one of these people who lives on this island and lives in paradise and can fly off whenever she wants to. A lot of these people have grown very attached to Brian Braddock and seeing him as the hero of their nation, and they're not comfortable with seeing someone else in that role. They don't want to see anyone else in that role. Also, part of the story is Brian Braddock. What does he do, and what is his life like? And it was important to us that the story of Betsy is also the story of Brian. They're twins. They go back long before Betsy was Psylocke, long before Betsy was an X-Man. Betsy Braddock and Brian Braddock have a history as twins, where one is mutant and one is human, as this British upper class family that predates the X-Men, and predates their appearance in the X-Men. Or Betsy's member, I guess, predates Betsy being on the team, and also predates the X-Men. Betsy appeared first in Captain Britain, I believe. So, and that was really so much of the Excalibur that I wanted to play with. Going back and reading the old Alan Moore and Alan Davis stories, and how those little 10-pagers and just how dense and brilliant they are. That kind of feeling where you were reading something that sort of denseness combined with the fact that one of my favorite issues of Excalibur is the Claremont Davis issue where they're all in the lighthouse and they have a cold, or Kitty has a cold and she's in the bath and they're all arguing about who uses the bathtub and stuff. So to me, I was like, I want to write an Excalibur book that combines the density of the mythology and the lore of Otherworld and magic, and not just that, but Arthurian mythology and the concept of magic as a whole, and this idea of an entire other battle going on that affects the X-Men in another world. And I want to combine that with the Claremont fun of characters who are a chosen family, who love each other very much, but also struggle to understand each other and occasionally get dosed with some good melodrama.
That's awesome. What do I think? What are the more fun twists in the book? Is involving Shogo, and what you do to Shogo is just absolutely hysterical and fun, and I think great, the stuff of fantasy where in the other world he's able to become a dragon. So here's Jubilee, her little baby, and he's a massive dragon. Fire-breathing dragon to boot, right? So, again, I think it's such a great twist. When you pitched that in the room, what was the response?
That was one of the things that came out of the first X-Men retreat, where there were so many things that I would say. It was that was my first Marvel retreat at all. That was before I'd been to the big room, was the X-Men room, and there were so many things that and this is the way creative rooms go in general, which is when they're on, and I love that feeling, which is you say something, you're like, I don't know, this is my impulse, or a Jonathanism is, that's the bad version. Say something. I'll be like, maybe this is.
What do you pitch something? This is the worst version of this, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. But it works. It works because sometimes you're just like, this is the bad version, but I saw this crappy movie where this happened, and you're like, well, we can do a good. I get the beats there, we can beef it up. So for me, it was I always love the idea of children having powers in fairy worlds, because they're so young, they're so full of belief and potential, and they have no doubt that they can be anything. It's just a concept of fairy stories that I've always liked, that children are incredibly powerful, right? In Labyrinth even, the baby. So I loved that idea, and I was like, well, also from a functional perspective, I love when Jubilee is a mom and has a baby strapped to her, but sometimes I need her to fight stuff. And I did write a whole book called Assassinistas about women fighting things with babies strapped to them, but they had Kevlar baby protectors.
Okay.
And I don't think I can use that beat again. I already used it in Assassinistas. I don't think I can use Kevlar baby carriers in Excalibur 2. So I needed to solve a solution, which was either have Shogo get babysat on the island all the time or do something better, make him a character in the story.
Right.
So the dragon thing was just kind of something I pitched. Like, I don't know, maybe he goes through and becomes a dragon or something. And everyone was like, yeah, you need a dragon in your book. And I was like, guess he's a dragon now. And I loved the idea for a lot of reasons. Like, it ended up working so well in the story because he provides transportation.
It solves many ills, right? Or many issues, right? Yeah.
Right. Like, he can fly up and look around at stuff. Like, he's it was one of those things that it solved so many story problems for me, in addition to being just a killer visual, because Marcus just draws him as terrifying. Like, I love so much that Marcus drew him as like a terrifying, like maleficent dragon.
Yeah.
But then also I was like, well, Betsy's psychic. She can talk to him even though he's a baby and even though he's a dragon. So we have these moments where Betsy is kind of translating for Shogo and Jubilee. But because he's a baby, his image of himself is really different. So Marcus draws these little cartoons of like when he's hungry, it'll be like chubby baby Shogo eating a snack, or like baby Shogo is happy, so don't worry, mom. And it's just so great. Like, Marcus is such a genius at juxtaposing like terrifying dragons with just like the most beautiful like chubby babies you'll ever see. And like, everyone's so pretty in his books, but that is a terrifying Shogo. Like, that is a maleficent dragon.
Yeah. I got to tell you, Marcus is doing some amazing work. I mean, I'm just going to highlight this one page here because that was, it's just, I'm looking at this shot and I'm thinking, wow, if I was drawing this book, if you'd written this page and you're like, this is what I need on this page. First of all, I'd be cursing your name, right? Because there's so much going on here. There's a lot going on, and the angle he took, the shot, the feeling of motion, and it's just stunning. I mean, he does some really, really, really stunning work on this book. As does your cover artist. This is another. Tell me about this. This was an alternate design. Right?
Yeah, that was an early design when we were still working on the design for Betsy. Marcus sent over so many cool designs. And one thing I really pushed for early on, which I was outvoted on and I think was the right thing, I think I'm glad I got outvoted on it, was I wanted Betsy to be super armored. Also, especially as a contrast to the fact that she had recently, amicably divorced from Quenon's body, and Quenon is now Psylocke. And Betsy is not Psylocke anymore. She's not this assassin. So I liked the idea of her being really armored up, both visually, because I think girls in armor look cool, and metaphorically, that she was really armored. And so I sent Marcus a bunch of reference, and he drew this design, which we ultimately decided was too bulky for Betsy. And I think that was the correct choice. But I thought it looked great. I thought it was such a cool early design, and you still see it sneak in when they're in other worlds sometimes. Their costumes are what I call the Ren Fair version of their costumes. Like you know how you see cosplayers sometimes get really creative and they're like, I want to be Wolverine, but I want to go to the Ren Fair, so they wear like a doublet and stuff. But it like looks like his costume. Like, that's how I feel about the other world costumes. I kind of describe them as like, I'm like, they're like imagine Gambit playing D&D, or like Gambit going to the Ren Fair, So it's like, it's still Gambit, but like his coat has a hood, like a thief. Or, Richter has like the paint because he's a druid now, one level, me being Alan Moore inspired and all that. And then on the other level, this book is me as a D&D nerd writing the X-Men fantasy book of my dreams.
Yeah. Well, it definitely shows. I mean, and also you're getting some great cover work from Mahmoud Assad, right? As Rar, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and this is another, one of the great visuals in the book, right? Is when Rogue is sort of in this sort of comatose state, but surrounded with these blue lilies or flowers or whatever. I want to show one more of his covers because I just think he's doing some outstanding work. And I know there's alternate covers on the book too that are great, but I love the layout of this piece, the power of the piece, and it's also it's a bit of a bait and switch for what actually happens in the issue, but it's just awesome. So I hear that there is a secret X-Men Slack where you guys discuss which members of the Krakoan Council you would be. So what member would you be? Who are you?
Recently I was saying that I think I'm Exodus because he's just like kind of like
I created Exodus. Well, at least the visual for Exodus.
Yes!
That was me. Yeah.
He looks so cool. I love the way he looks.
A very young.
Well, yeah.
And I designed him knowing that I would only have to draw him a few times because it's a bit difficult of a costume. It's those things on his back, just like how do you get around, you know? So.
Right. I love that though. I love a really extra outfit. Part of why I love him is because of his appearance. I think he looks so cool. Yeah. Well, no, I think I might be Exodus because he's like, there's kind of that like, well, you're kind of a wild card. And I think when I was like announced on the X-Men, some people had that like, like, well, she's never really done any X-Men stuff before. But I feel like, you know, I fit in, but I'm definitely the one that comes up with like a lot of esoteric stuff, like the magic stuff and everything. Right. So I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm Exodus because he's like generally not always the first to fight, but often pipes up with weird input. Either that or I'm Apocalypse, but I'm like the kind, gentle, modern one.
Well, let's hope. The other cool thing about the book are these sort of, I guess I'm calling them interstitials, but you know they're sort of the text pages, right? Which in some ways they remind me of Watchmen, right? Alan Moore's Watchmen, except that Alan would have he had them in the back of the book, right? So and there were sort of background information on the world, but your interstitials, you know, they're placed somewhere. They could be, you know, a third of the way through the story and midway through the story, and it's sort of like a break in the action. And you get these sort of, you know, like the grimoire that you were talking about, or two people messaging each other. Now, again, is that a construct from Jonathan? Is that something that you want to insert into your book? Because it's so unique and it adds so much flavor to the story.
Yeah, those are definitely a Jonathan construct. He loves infographics and all that, but we were definitely encouraged to like use those pages. I think we all early on. I don't recall that we were like mandated to use data pages. I think in the room that was something we were all like, yeah, we like those. We might have been mandated to use them if we didn't like them, but I think we were all like, we can use this. Yeah. You know, like we all very clearly realized what a great storytelling assist they are, both as scene breaks and as exposition and as clever ways of distributing exposition. So part of the game of using data pages is, you know, sometimes if you like, you know, what Ben Percy does in X-Force with them is really genius, because he's, you know, using them to write stuff, but you're asking questions about who's writing it. You know, you can use the data pages to create questions, to create mystery. I use mine a lot to be pages from Apocalypse's grimoire, which is like his spell book, his notes, his notebook, you know. If you were to just rip a page out of his moleskin and see what's in there, you would see this grimoire page. Sometimes I use them for maps, which is because I like fantasy. You know, every fantasy book has a map. Sometimes I use them for decrees or diagrams, but they're great. They're great, especially in a book like Excalibur, which can be really super high concept, and I don't want to bog down pages explaining magical theory. I don't have to do that. And plus, I think there are people that would probably never, ever pick up a book on magical theory, but might learn a little about it if Apocalypse tells them, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's like one of the fun things I love about writing is taking weird things that I love and making other people interested in them. So it's fun to be this like, you know, okay, Apocalypse says Aleister Crowley, like.
Well, I didn't even know I didn't know what the grimoire was, and I saw it in the book, and I'm like, let me look this up. There it was. So it's a thing. I just, you know, shows you what I know about magic, right? So Tini, you want to take on some fan questions?
Let's do it.
Okay, hang on. Let's set up here. Let's see and get my questions. All right, here we go. All right. So question number 1 from Chad Gill. Well, he actually has 3 questions. How old were you when it clicked that this profession was going to be it for you?
Well, yeah, I always had dreams of being a writer, and I've always liked writing, but I was probably like 20, early 20s, 24, 25, when I looked around at my desk one day and said, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
I have to go make stuff. And that was about when I started submitting scripts, and I was like, I want to do comics. That's what I loved, right? And like, I've written other things, and I love writing other things, but
cool. So here's a
comics.
broad one. What inspires you?
A lot of things. Gosh, reading, music, other people. Like the biggest thing I can say about inspiration is, as much as you love comics, look outside comics too.
Yeah, that's the key. It really is.
Yeah. Like go to museums, listen to music you may not ever listen to, and let people show you movies you have no interest in. Mm-hmm. Like, let people share their interests with you and find what makes them interesting, and I think that makes you a better writer.
Cool. And I think you've kind of answered this one a little bit, but here goes. Have you ever been starstruck working with or meeting certain professionals in your career?
The first time I ever met Jonathan was in the X-Men room, and I told him to his face that I had not gone to have him sign my books at a convention because I was too intimidated by him, and he laughed at me.
There you go.
No, we're friends now, but yeah.
All right. So let's see. This is from Murphy Lay. What's Tini's favorite thing about writing the symbol for Apocalypse? I love her take and would love to know a bit about the thought process behind writing him. I mean, you kind of touched on this a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel like I talked about that a lot, but it's the age and the mindset, and I really just try to entirely divorce myself from the mindset of what a modern apocalypse would want in 2020. I think about that, but I also think about, I divorce that from the concept of that being the only apocalypse. I really try to remove him from the idea of just wanting what he wants now. He wants things that he has wanted since before any of the countries we live in were ever conceived of. You know, like, he is old on a scale that does not make sense to us. And that's how I write him. Yeah. Like that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. This is from Pam Mrs. Richter. How old? Wait, I'm sorry. Sorry, it's small on my end. How did you come up with the idea of making Shogo a dragon, which, by the way, is genius, and I love it. I think you kind of answered that as well.
Yeah.
And
very magic.
Let's see. Let's move on here. Okay, why use Wiccan in Death's Head instead of other Marvel UK characters, but not use him in Magic Dawn of X?
That's a really good question. A lot of that is just organic. I started working on Death's Head long before I started working on Excalibur. And with Death's Head, the first characters I pitched for it, they weren't Marvel UK characters, but they were like technical characters. Like, I wanted to use Iron Man and Jocasta and Machine Man, also because they were currently being used in Dan Slott's Iron Man run, which I was reading, and I thought maybe we could veer into that a little. But the ideas that I came up with were all like a little too close to what Dan was doing. Like, Dan and I were just kind of, not through any, like Dan had his ideas planned out, and then I kind of read some of his stuff, and I was like, oh, well, what if Death's Head interacts with Iron Man like this and does that? And it was like, well, it's cool, but bringing him in will kind of, Dan's kind of got his thing set up, so let's not have him mess with Iron Man. So I said, okay, well, Iron Man's my favorite, so now I got to think about someone else. And I thought, well, let's go entirely to the other direction. Let's not make it about him being a machine or a bounty hunter. Let's make it about what Death's Head is and who he is. And I was like, well, there's all these versions of him. And I started thinking about obsolescence, right? About like being a cell phone that's about to be obsolete, but someone turns you back on and you're like, I still work. Why are you using the new one? And with that, I got really stuck on how much I loved Wiccan and Hulkling and Al Ewing's New Avengers book, and how much that had kind of touched on the idea of them as Avengers and not Young Avengers now. But then now they're not really on a team or doing anything. And so I was like, well, they probably feel like they've kind of aged out of being Young Avengers, and maybe they're obsolete too. So from that, I kind of was like, well, how about this really unexpected story about obsolescence and about aging? And sometimes when you think of a theme, the characters that help you best tell the theme are like really unexpected. And in that case, it just ended up being Wiccan and Hulkling and Death's Head, the Young Avengers and Death's Head together in this story about obsolescence and aging, and a new version of Death's Head that was not at all like the old ones. He was the the Eve to Death's Head's Wally. He is the new shiny version, and from there I came out of that book with a lot to say about Wiccan, and then so when Strike Force opened up, I had a place for him on that team because I wanted a magic user who would kind of bounce off of Damon Hellstrom. So it was just organic. It was just like I had been writing Wiccan for a while, and that wasn't where he wanted to go. And it didn't seem right for him to put him in Excalibur just because I liked him. He was on another journey. He's kind of on this more Avengers-ish journey right now. So I didn't want to pull him out of that.
Okay, cool. Let's see what else we have here. From Danny. Oh, I don't have a question, but just wanted to say I really like the show, Mr. Quesada. You have great guests, and the interviews, discussions are always fun. I put that I went in there. I just wanted to self-plug. So, sorry, Tini. Thank you, Danny. Let's see, from Kurt Wagner. It's Blue Kurt Wagner. Hi, Tini. I've enjoyed the magic angle to Excalibur and Strikeforce so far. And as a Kurt Excalibur fan, no, really? I have to ask, is there any chance of our favorite Excalibur sorceress, Amanda Sefton, returning from beyond to appear in either book?
Well, it's a lot more likely that she'd show up in Excalibur than Strikeforce. I can tell you that definitively. But yeah, I mean, I love mining the continuity of Marvel UK, of Betsy's whole history, of Kurt's whole. I mean, characters like Kurt and like Rachel aren't, some of these classic Excalibur characters, and Kitty aren't in the book. But if you're reading, you see, I still try and have them show up in ways. Like it was important to me to have Kitty show up in issue 2, to take them to the lighthouse because that was Kitty's home when she was in Excalibur, and I brought back Pete Wisdom because. I'm trouble.
Listen, I love Pete. I think I hope you do more with him. I think that character has so much potential. It's one of my in the magic realm of Marvel characters. I love Pete Wisdom. Just even the name Pete Wisdom is awesome.
Yeah, right. It's a great name. I think he's fun, and I think that he was like, he was one character that I brought in because I was like, when they're in Krakoa and Otherworld, Pete Wisdom is such a great character to constantly remind us that this is Captain Britain and this is a Captain Britain book, and here, there's trouble at home, and you're Captain Britain, you have to come fix it. So Pete Wisdom, was a character who was useful in that capacity. To go back to Amanda Sefton, and I mean, there are so many Marvel UK characters and Excalibur characters that haven't showed up yet. Doesn't mean they're not going to. I just, it's no fun to just have a page where you flip the page and for no reason everyone you want to see is standing there waving at you. That's no fun. They got to show up like when they got to show up. So just like there was, a place for Pete, there's a place for these other characters. Some of them, I know where they are. You just haven't seen them yet, because we haven't gotten there yet. So The short answer is, yeah, there's a chance.
Yep, maybe. All right. Bradley, this is Bradley T. What was your inspiration behind the Dawn of X Excalibur run, and is there a mutant from the other series that you'd love to use full-time in Excalibur? Cheers and best wishes from Malaysia to both me and you. I really enjoyed the Thanos miniseries.
Oh, thank you, Bradley. I loved writing that book. It's very kind. I talked a little about my inspiration behind Excalibur, but as far as mutants from other series, one of the nice things is that we get to borrow each other a lot. Like because they're all on the island and stuff, you get that kind of like Westchester-y feel where they can all hang out together anytime they want. It's kind of the magic of the gates and the island and all that. So I like to use Kitty and Rachel and Kurt for obvious Excalibur reasons. I think if I had to pick any one to steal and use full time, it would be Rachel Summers, Rachel Gray. But because I love her, she's one of my favorite characters. But I'm glad I didn't, because I've gotten to read Leah Williams and David Badion's X Factor, and I love what they're doing with Rachel and X Factor. And I'm glad she's there. So I'm glad I didn't steal her, because I'm glad where she is now. But if I got like a card to steal anyone for an issue, it would probably be Rachel.
Be Rachel. Okay. Let's see. Pay him again. First, Excalibur is my favorite book. And so my question is, Richter was quite depressed in issues 3, but in 4, he was looking much better. And he said Apocalypse just listened to him. But are we seeing more of what and how that actually went? And about the reason his powers were out of control. Yeah, I got that same question too. What the hey?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, that's a hell of a mystery, right? Like if your friend went and talked to like Apocalypse and came back and said, I'm feeling fine, considering both the history that Apocalypse has with changing people like Angel, and the history that Richter has with going to people when his powers are out of control that might not be good people, that's pretty concerning stuff, right? But it seems to be okay so far. So probably not a big deal, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know. It sounds to me like you're trying to sell some books. That's what it sounded to me.
Maybe. But yeah, I mean, the fact of it is, I know that you want to know that. That's why I did it that way.
Right. Okay. Enough said. Enough said. All right, we're winding down here. Spider-Woman Daily. Can Tini share any hints about the Strike Force tie-in to Empire?
Yeah, I can. Tom Brevoort and Al Ewing talked a little bit about the tie-in at C2E2, so I can share a little about what they said, which was that it's a Strike Force tie-in, and it's Billy, it's Wiccan focused. So as you've seen, a lot of the Empire stuff is very Hulkling focused. There's a lot of mystery surrounding him and what will be going on with him and Empire. And I've gotten really lucky and gotten to read a lot of Empire stuff that a lot of people watching haven't. So I got to be careful about what I say so I don't spoil anything, because it's really cool. But the Strike Force tie-in is, what you do and what it's like to be a person with your own job on Earth while your boyfriend is doing dangerous space stuff, or fiance is doing dangerous space stuff. For a lot of people, Billy and Teddy are like that. I mean, honestly, at the time I was reading comics and everything, they were my Jean Grey and Scott Summers, they were like,
right.
They were those characters that I and a lot of people were like, that's love, man. That's true love. They are superheroes in love, and that is a superhero love story. And they're really important to me and a lot of people. And they are to Al too. They're two characters that Al and I have always been really passionate about. And even, Joe, I don't remember if you were in the room at the time where Al and I were getting super passionate about that couple to everyone. We love them. We think they're really important. So Al is doing such cool things in Empire with Hulkling and I'm writing Wiccan in a book, that it was just a no-brainer that I was like, I have to write. And I asked, and I was like, of course. I was like, I have to write a tie-in. And usually it's like, if you're like, hey, I have an idea for a tie-in, it's like, yeah, cool, tell us.
Right.
It's not like it's one of the nice things about working at Marvel. If you're like, I want to play with that too. Usually it's like, cool, let's make a book. So I was like, I really want to do a story about, everyone's going to want to know, what does Wiccan think of all this? And so I wanted to write that. Cool. And so.
All right, let's see here. This is from Dan Panosian. I don't know if you know Dan. You may know Dan.
I love his art.
He's a horrible human being, but he asked a question. Favorite author and favorite screenplay writer, and what attracts you to their writing?
So I'm bad about favorites, like all-time favorites, but I can do what my current favorites are.
Sure.
That's easier for me. I'm really into, screenplay writer / director. I'm really into Alex Garland right now. I haven't seen his new show Devs yet, but
I started Devs. It's intense. Yeah.
Yeah, I really want to, and all his stuff is super intense, and I think that's why I like it and I respond to it. His stuff is really, and okay, not to blow smoke up one of my boss's butts here, but I think I like Alex Garland's stuff for a lot of the same reasons I like Jonathan Hickman's stuff. It's that it's slick and sci-fi and mysterious and incredibly impeccably aesthetically organized.
It's world building at its best.
But and it's really subtle world building where it's you realize it before no one's telling you anything. You just you're equipped with the information so you can be dropped into the story. And I love that about Garland's work. But at the same time, again, also to blow smoke up Jonathan's butt, the thing I like about both their work too is that despite looking slick and cold, it's actually really human.
Yeah.
And it's like intensely emotional and personal. So I also really, I finally read Gillian Flynn for the first time. I had never read Gone Girl. I finally read that, and I thought that was such a cool book. I love true crime, and obviously it's not a true crime book, but it was clearly written by someone who knows a lot about crime.
Right.
So I got really into that. What else have I just read? I just read China Miéville's The City and the City. That was super cool. Probably my favorite comic writer is Grant Morrison. To me, his work really, really embodies so much of what you can do when you're not afraid of your own mind.
Yeah.
I'm someone who I often have bigger ideas than make sense to me right away. Like I'll pitch an idea and then people will be like, how does that make sense? And I'm like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. But the idea is big and it's appealing.
Yeah.
And then I'll build the human elements in. And Grant Morrison's new X-Men is super inspirational for me, both as a comic writer and a writer in general, but also as a person writing the X-Men right now. I also find Matt Fraction's work super inspirational. He was one of the first comic writers I read that I was like, his work was human and cynical in a way that I'm cynical too. And I was like, I really appreciated his work being like super cynical, but also really having a lot of heart. Like his Iron Man run with Sal Larroca is some of my favorite comics of all time. And those were some books that I read and I was like, I want to write superhero comics because I want to write them like that. Yeah. Cynical, but with heart. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's see. Let's do two more questions. These came in on the fly live. Let's see if I can put this in here there we go. From Cy Locke. What is Betsy Braddock's current power set and what's in the future for her?
Yeah, so a lot of questions we get about that because she's not Psylocke and people are like, where's the butterfly? Where's the katana? Where's all that stuff? Well, we've talked about all this in the room. Again, this is stuff that it's like, if you're asking that question, we want you to be. There are mysteries there that we want to solve. But her current power set is, she has the same mutant power she always has. She's the same psychic, telepathy and I guess not telekinesis, but like the manifestation of her psychic blades. Her sword, as we see it now as Captain Britain, and her shield are extensions of her psychic energy. And that's absolutely, if you see her and you wonder sometimes, like, she's holding that sword and shield, why isn't she just using her psychic powers? Like, consider that it's, she's a cup that's filled with energy. And if you're holding your sword and shield, you maybe have less of that psychic water to fill another cup or to do other things. So it does, exhaust her psychically sometimes to be Captain Britain, and we'll see the effects of that. And how she deals with that going forward. But the other thing is that she quite simply has Captain Britain powers now too, because she has the Amulet of Right. So she can travel to other world at will. She can fly. She's strong and fast. But she had some of those things anyway. But the big Captain Britain upgrades are that she can fly and she can travel to other world at will. Yeah, Jessica will be part of Strike Force as long as we have Strike Force and as long as no one takes her from me. She's one of my favorite characters. And, a cool thing about team books and about working with superheroes and stuff is, like, they can have a day job. Like, they can have a superhero. They can go do a mission and then go be in their book. For the record, if you guys aren't reading Carla Pacheco and Perry Perez's Spider-Woman, I guess number 1 is out? I don't know if number 2's out yet with the delays and everything. But number 1 was really fun, and I'm a huge Jessica Drew fan, and I'm a huge Carla Pacheco fan, so it's really fun. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend. Especially if you're reading Strike Force and you like Jess, because Carla writes Jess. Carla and I have similar feelings about Jessica Drew and about how she is, so we write her with kind of same attitude.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me. They're saying that they lost my audio. You can hear me though, right?
I can hear you just fine.
Hold on. I'm just texting. We're on a bit of a delay. Okay, it's back. All right. Okay. So, Tini, actually, I have a friend who always submits questions, but likes to remain anonymous. So, but her question for you, this will be our final one. If you could have a choice, would you? And I find this interesting with you, especially with the way you discuss your writing and view on things. Would you prefer to live 100 years in the past or 100 years in the future?
100 years in the future.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah,
as a Tony Stark fan, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love fantasy and history and all that, like, that's the past. It's there to mine. How could I not choose the unknown?
Yeah.
Plus, if you choose 100 years in the future, then you get a whole new 100 years of past to study.
Oh, look at that. Didn't even think of it that way. That's awesome. Tini, I can't thank you enough. This is great, and it's great. I think it's hopefully our fans get to know you a little bit better. I know they know your writing intimately, but this is with a fun part of the show. It's because you and I don't actually know each other all that well. We've met in the room. I think the first time we met was in the X-Men room the first time. And I remember walking out and talking to the editors saying, wow, she's really smart. She's got some stuff to say, which you can just sense that energy. So, but thank you again. And we'll do this again. I mean, any parting shots, any parting words, anything for writers, creators out there that are looking to get in, that look at you and say, wow, I hope I have a career like that, a path like that. Anything?
Yeah, do what you love. If you're doing something and you hate it, switch gears. But at the same time, don't make yourself allergic to hard work. Eat your vegetables, do your homework in the creative sense. Take your notes, learn from people that are more skilled than you, and accept that what feels like criticism, when it's from the right place, is really just there to make you better. Mm-hmm. If I hadn't, I've gotten notes that made me close an email and turn around and fold my arms and pout and stomp off and yell at my friends about how my editors don't know what they're talking about. And then a day later, I'm like, wait, this is better. Don't be afraid to work with the people you work with. Don't be shy. For as much as I joke about walking into the room and being really intimidated by Jonathan, when I have a story question, I text him. We talk. With the people I work with, my artists, with my editors, we talk. With you, when I have these opportunities to sit and talk, we talk, because you learn stuff, and it's vital. Yeah. You can't do it without this stuff.
It's true. Well, Tina, again, thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy the sun. I certainly am enjoying some daylight. And we'll talk again soon. All right. So
we will.
Thank you, Getty. Thanks so much. And the work you're doing on Excalibur is outstanding. So thanks for that.
Thank you. I'm having fun.
Cool. See ya. Hey guys, so I hope you enjoy that. Tini is amazing. If you're not reading Excalibur, go pick it up. If you haven't read her Strike Force, go pick it up. She's just a great new voice that I love highlighting, and we're loving the work she's doing at Marvel, and even her work outside of Marvel. So it's all good. And again, for me, thank you. Thanks for tuning in. And what do we have next? Who's next? On wait, that's tomorrow. We're coming on tomorrow. Tomorrow we've got. Yes, that's right, figure. We got Paul Scheer on tomorrow, and Paul's got a show on Marvel too. We're going to talk about that. So Paul's going to be on. I'm sure it'll be silly, it'll be crazy, and we'll have some fun. So thanks for joining me. It was great. Let's see if I can hit the right button here and sign off. I'll see you in the funny books. And hang on. We didn't do the... forgot. To be continued. See you guys. Take care.